Washington columnist Dinan. Stephen, are you there, my friend?
I'm here, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Been reading you, and lately.
Well, at least your stories.
I've been reading you, man.
Is there something I don't know about?
I'm told I'm tough to read, so the stories I should stick with those.
You're a good poker player. That's what Tony says.
I'm reading your voice here. You got an article today in the Washington Times on something rather remarkable. We said at the top of the show we were going to talk about folks' money, and you had a little article here about what's happening to evidently a great deal of it in a hurry. Would you enlighten us a little further on that?
Sure. So President Obama, you may remember back in late May and June, there was a lot of complaints that the stimulus money wasn't being spent fast enough, wasn't getting out. Mm-hmm. And so the president set a goal of having obligated which is government speak for, well, we got it earmarked for somewhere. We don't quite know where, but earmarked for somewhere. Mm-hmm. And he set a goal for having $225 billion of it obligated by the 200-day mark of the stimulus. Now, they I wrote a few stories earlier in late July and August.
That's $1 billion a day. That's pretty good.
Well, yeah, but they'd slowed down about July and August. They were down to less than $500 million a day. You know, sometimes they're spending only $2 billion in a whole week.
Oh my goodness!
And so
austerity.
He had this goal that he set out, and they needed to make the goal, and they made it by this last minute September 4th $11 billion infusion of education aid to states, which they were unable to explain to me exactly why they sped it up. So I'll let you draw your conclusions as to why they sped it up.
Shovel-ready money, in other words.
The thing about this, of course, is $1 billion a day is imagine trying to be transparent and to have folks be able to look at and decide whether that $1 billion a day is being spent right. I mean, if the goal certainly is to, when they passed it, they said the goal is to pump the money out, but you want to know what's happening. And if it's that uneven that some days we're spending only, I say only, but a couple $100 million, and other weeks we're spending, per day, and other weeks we're spending. This last week they spent more than about $2.5 billion a day to make that. If you do the average out, to make that final goal, and you got to imagine what decisions are going on there to get the money out.
Stephen, they've got potentially a serious problem. What if this economy turns around before they're able to shovel these billions out the door?
Well, that's exactly.
My goodness gracious!
It's exactly the problem they face. They, in some ways, their goal is to try and be able to claim credit for the economic turnaround when it does happen. And you remember this from your time in the Senate back in 2002. The question was, did the tax cuts help with the turnaround that we were beginning to experience back in the Bush tax cuts? Mm-hmm. The Obama administration desperately wants to be able to claim that the stimulus spending is going to help with whatever, we all know a recovery is coming. We don't know when, but one will come. And their goal is to be able to claim we got the money out, and that's what led to this. And, we'll never know the answer. There will be studies on either side of that.
Exactly.
But they'll claim it.
As they're claiming on Wall Street today that all the things that they did with regard to the banking industry save the world from economic collapse, and that one will be, of course, debated for a long, long time. But on a you're being serious, but I'm being a little bit light on this because it's so absurd. But on a more serious note, it does take me back to time in the Senate, and the one thing that has not changed from the time that I was up there is the waste, fraud, and abuse issue. You mentioned transparency. We have agencies. We have a government that couldn't pass an audit, that'd be hauled to jail if it was a private enterprise. The president talks about waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicare system. That's what he's going to squeeze in order to pay for these trillions of dollars. Can you imagine what the truth is? I mean, what is happening when the government? This is ordinary operation of government, but when it's handled in such a speedy fashion, what is really happening to that money. I mean, there's no ability to keep up with it.
Well, let me share a story with you. I had a story in Friday's paper, which I was actually really sort of pleased with. It didn't get as much attention as I was hoping, but it was on forest fire fighting money. The Forest Service released a certain amount of forest fire, wildland fire management money last week.
Yeah, in D.C., right?
$2.7 million of that went to D.C., a public-private parks partnership in D.C. to refurbish urban parks. You have fires raging in California, and we're spending money here to refurbish urban parks.
I did read that, Steve. It was a great piece, and I sent it around, and it's frustrating you can't get this stuff out, but you've been doing some great reporting on this stuff, and it is so absurd that you can hear it in Fred's voice to talk about it every day like we talk about it and write about it every day like you're writing about it. You can't believe it's really true, and it's really I was stunned to find some of our Republican conservative lobbyist friends that were so busy this spring and this summer. I said, what do you mean you're so busy? How can you be so busy with the Obama administration and in the Senate and the House? Are you kidding, Jerry? Do you not understand how much money they have to get rid of? These e-contracts and the government contracts and all that process that they had to go through before, it's been eschewed. It's been dismissed.
You're exactly right, and what you mentioned is funny. I've had the same experience. The Republican lobbyists who were certain that their careers were almost all but over, 8 months ago. Oh, Democrats control everything. There's as you put it, there is so much money and so much work out there that people are hiring any lobbyist they can just to try and get a piece of $787 billion.
Well, where do you see this thing going? I mean, are they, by the time the chickens come home to roost and we find out what's really happened to the money, of course, it will be well on down the road with it. Is there no accountability until then?
That's a very good question. I think probably not. I mean, I guess I'm sort of surprising myself saying that. Probably not so much. I mean, your colleague, Senator Tom Coburn, actually, I guess you may have been out before he came in. He was in the House when you were in the Senate.
Yeah.
But he's done some work in trying to bring accountability to this, and it had a very interesting back and forth with the administration when he released his list of 100 wasteful projects. The administration spent a lot of time trying to debunk that and tell him where he was wrong rather than looking at where he might have actually been right, which was surprising to me. But I guess I would say that I don't know that we'll get an accounting until it's already spent, but the accounting, once it, at that point, a year or so down the line, the accounting we get may teach us something about going forward in the future, how we, a massive spending project like this, whether it is the right thing to do.
Exactly. Just a few years ago, the people advising Obama were then talking about the fact that it's monetary policy. It's not spending all this money by the Congress that gets us out of a recession. Stephen Dinan, the Washington Times, thank you very, very much for your help, and keep up the good work.
It's been my pleasure.